So I kind of feel like waxing your bike chain is almost the cycling equivalent of joining a cult. No one's actually asked me about it or shown any real interest, to be honest. But over the last year, I've talked about waxing my bike chain so much, even to people that don't ride bikes. Okay, awesome. So what's new with you? Well, yeah, thanks for asking. I'm actually working on a new blend of chain wax. It's got microcrystalline. I never thought I would become one of those people. But here we are. For over a decade, I've just used this green finish line chain oil on my bikes, and I was happy. But I was living in ignorance. I didn't know. I hadn't seen behind the curtain. But now I get it. The smooth drivetrain, the lack of grime. You can touch your chain. It's witchcraft. So come with me, child. Have you heard the good word? Tungsten disulfide, yes? Waxing my bike chain is too much of a faff, too much work. That's what I told myself, and that's what put me off. You gotta get your chain clean and then put wax on. That sounds like a lot of work to me. And you need a crock pot. Do I look like an alchemist? But no, seriously, I mean, everyone says this, but it is true. Once you get it set up and you've got some chains in rotation, it is super straightforward for the most part. I've been a convert for about a year now, and I've taken a sort of DIY approach to it. So let me talk you through what worked, what didn't, and the one ingredient that kind of made this whole thing actually worth doing. First thing, before waxing, you got to clean all of the oil and factory lubrication out of not just the chain, but ideally off the cassette jockey wheels and chain rings as well. Now, I have an ultrasonic cleaner already, so that's what I've been using. So yeah, you can get one of those, but you can get an equivalent job done with a bit of elbow grease, and for the chain, a Tupperware pot. So pop it in there with warm water degreaser, give it a shake, leave it to soak, and it's a pretty much equivalent job. So first thing I bought was a wax pot or melter from Amazon. Got this one for 23 quid. Now it'll comfortably fit one chain in there, maybe two at a push, but it's designed for at-home hair removal. So like waxing your bikini line or whatever, rather than waxing chains. But it works great for both those things. No further questions. A big old bag of wax. So yeah, I got this 1 kilogram of paraffin wax pellets on Amazon for like 7 quid. Now I think it's marketed towards candle making actually, but as long as it's 100% pure paraffin wax that's unscented, yeah, you're good to go. Now, some people just run that straight paraffin wax, and it, yeah, can definitely work, but I've gone down the additive route. So I initially went with molybdenum disulfide and PTFE or Teflon powder. Molybdenum disulfide, and this is the packet that it actually came in, it's an anti-wear additive, and it's a fine grey powder, looks almost like graphite. It's used in a lot of high-performance grease and motor oil blends as well, but in this case, it's a really effective dry lubricant. And PTFE powder, so hopefully you can read that there, 100% polytetrafluoroethylene. So while it's a little bit different, it's essentially the same sort of compound used on non-stick frying pans. So it's incredibly low friction, and again, a really effective dry lubricant. However, there is a lot of research to suggest that PTFEs like this are really not good for the environment. They're part of a group of forever chemicals that never break down when they're kind of out in nature, and they can bioaccumulate inside of animals like us. Yeah, really not particularly good. As it happens, PTFEs are used everywhere, so a little bit on your bike chain, probably not the biggest deal in the world, but still, I've moved away from this, and I'll cover that later. But at least initially, these are the two I went with. In the wax pot here, 250 grams of paraffin wax pellets, 5 grams of PTFE powder, and then 2 grams of this molybdenum disulfide. Now, I'll cover the process in a bit more detail later, but it was great. The drivetrain, though a little noisier than a regular oil chain, was surprisingly quiet, shifting was great, and there was no more black grime to deal with. But there were a number of drawbacks. Breaking in the chain was a right pain. So once you pull it out of the wax and leave it to dry, it goes rock solid, and then you need to break every link pretty much individually before you put it on the bike. You might have seen something like this. I found this on Instagram. You basically wrap the waxed chain round, run it through with a drill, and it kind of does it all for you. I don't have one of those, so I have to break each link individually by hand, which is tedious and can be quite painful actually. Related to this, wax kind of goes everywhere. So you can see here, I put a freshly waxed chain on my turbo trainer. The wax flakes went all over the bike and all over the floor as well. So it's only cleaner than an oil chain once all that excess wax has flaked off. If you ride in the wet, you're probably going to get a rusty chain. So I've got caught in the rain a number of times over the last year. And if you're really quick and you dry it off, you'll probably be okay. But if you can't get to it in time, it rusts so quickly. So leave it overnight, for example. It's a whole process. You've got to take the chain off, boil it in water for a few minutes to sort of clean everything, then take it out and dry it quickly so it doesn't rust again. Then you can re-wax. For example, this chain, I got back in from a wet ride, but then had to rush out for the afternoon. So it sat for a couple of days and it rusted so much, but you can bring them back. So I boiled it in water for about 10-15 minutes. You can see in the pan all the grime that came off. Here it is after freshly being boiled. Looks quite clean actually. So I re-waxed it and I'm still actually using it on this bike here. So it's not the end of the world, but does require a bit of work. So yeah, I'll touch on this again later, but if you ride a lot in the rain, I personally wouldn't bother with chain waxing. I just don't think it's worth it. Now, all of the above I was kind of prepared for, to be honest, but this next drawback came out of nowhere. I waxed my chain, broke the links, and then set off to cycle to my nan's house to spend New Year with her. On the way, the chain was constantly skipping on the cassette, so I thought it needed a bit more breaking in, so carried on for about 5 or 6 miles, but it barely improved. So I pulled over to the side of the road and just look at the chain. Because of the cold, it was like 2 or 3 degrees, the wax embedded inside had become so stiff that when I grabbed it, it kind of held its shape. I tried aggressively working the links to free things up for a couple minutes and it helped a bit, but it wasn't really until the temperature increased to 6-8 degrees that the issue started to subside. I thought it might be a worn cassette as well, but 4 months later, I'm still using this cassette on the bike and it's totally fine, so that wasn't the issue. Right, less than 30 seconds, let's go. So if you like cycling, you might want some clothes to go with it. I've worn Sirocco gear on no joke every single ride for over 5 years at this point. It's great value, looks nice, and lasts ages too. I still wear the stuff I got 5 years ago. They've got everything from socks, jackets, jerseys, bib shorts, cycle glasses, cycle caps. So if you want to check them out, you can scan this QR code on screen or use my link in the description. It'll get you 10% off everything they do, and it helps me out a little bit as well. Right, that's it. Let's get back to it. So I ran this initial formulation for about 6 months, and despite the drawbacks, it was great. Wear on the drivetrain components seemed much lower. There was no more kind of black grime to contend with. Overall, it was very positive, but the drawbacks, honestly, were starting to annoy me. Breaking the links was a pain, wax chips got everywhere, and riding over the winter, because of the kind of rust issue, I found myself re-waxing once a week in some cases, plus that PTFE powder was playing on my mind. So I'll just put you back on the tripod here. I tried a new formulation and it made such a big difference. This is the old wax formula that I pulled out of the pot there. I ditched the PTFE powder and made up a new batch with paraffin wax pellets, the molybdenum disulfide, some of this tungsten disulfide, which is another dry lubricant that is used in a lot of high-end chain wax blends actually. It does a similar job to molybdenum disulfide with some slightly different properties, so banged some of that in there, and importantly added this microcrystalline wax. Straight paraffin wax blends work well, but when it cools, paraffin wax forms quite large crystalline structures, which makes it hard and low friction, but also quite brittle, which is why a lot of it flakes off from the chain. Microcrystalline wax, as the kind of name suggests, has a much finer crystalline structure, which makes it softer, so it's less prone to flaking, and slightly more sticky or adhesive, for kind of lack of a better word. Essentially, adding 8 to 10% of this stuff to my mix by weight, I saw huge benefits. First off, this mix is noticeably softer. So the original one here is quite kind of flaky and brittle, whereas this one, you can kind of sink a fingernail in it. It just feels softer and more pliable, which then means when you pull the chain out of it, it's not super stiff and rigid. So the last couple of times, I've actually just been able to kind of thread it onto the drivetrain, spin the crank a few times, and it's done. I haven't had to go in and kind of individually break every link. It also seems much kind of softer in the cold as well, so I haven't faced that issue where the chain kind of holds its shape in cold temperatures. And because it's so much softer, it barely flakes off compared to my old straight paraffin blend.
Okay, so this is maybe a little bit of an exaggeration. It does still flake off when you first put the chain on, like you can see here, but it's definitely not as bad as my original pure paraffin-based blend.
It just sticks to the chain in a way a pure paraffin-based one can't really match. This leads to a couple of knock-on benefits. So the anti-wear additives kind of stay where they're supposed to be rather than falling off with the wax. And because it doesn't flake off everywhere, it doesn't leave patches of the chain kind of exposed to air and moisture as you're riding along, which exacerbates the rust issue. Plus, microcrystalline wax is more hydrophobic, so water repellent, than straight paraffin. I've done similar wet rides and also rinsed the bike down with a garden hose afterwards, stuff like that. And while it doesn't make it completely rust-free, I found this new formulation has a much lower propensity to rust. Yeah, much better. And in some ways, you can kind of see the difference as well. So this old formulation, although when I heated this puck up to get it out of the pot, the additives kind of squidged up the sides. Basically, when it cooled, all of the particles fell to the bottom and you're left with just straight paraffin wax on the top there. Whereas, well, in this new formula, you can see it's more mottled and cloudy because with the microcrystalline wax added in, it's got a higher kind of ability to hold the additives in suspension in the wax. In fact, you know what? Let me just show you the kind of physical differences between the two formulas. These two chains, this one is the new formula with the microcrystalline wax. This one is the old formula. I've literally just pulled them out of the wax. I haven't broken any of the links or anything, and you'll see the difference. Right, so the old formula one here, you can see, hopefully you can see, it's just really, really stiff, right? So I'm holding it up nearly vertically, and none of the links are breaking, right? So both sides of the chain have been separated, but it's just really, really ultra stiff, right? So that's the old formula. This is the new one with the microcrystalline wax. Again, I haven't broken any of the links, and you can see it's already kind of bending because the wax formulation is just so much softer. So it barely requires any breaking of the wax. It's just so much easier to deal with. So yeah, bang, broken. And you can see I can just kind of wiggle it and the links break themselves. And yeah, let me show you the old one because it's just, the difference is really stark. So again, like it's just super rigid. I mean, I can just about get it to break, but yeah, you've got to go through and individually crack every single link. It's just, yeah, a bit more of a pain in the butt. It's just a lot stiffer, a lot more rigid. And they're both completely cold, by the way. They've been out of the wax over an hour each in both cases. So let me give you the recipe for this updated mix. So this is my current formula, really happy with it. 230 grams of paraffin wax pellets, about 25 grams of microcrystalline wax, so 8 to 10% by weight, and then 2 grams each of tungsten disulfide and molybdenum disulfide. Here's my process. Heat the wax to about 80 degrees C, which happens to be around halfway on my heating gauge. Pop the chain in there, leave for about 10-15 minutes, agitating occasionally to remove any air bubbles. Then pull it out, leave it to dry, job done. But I do have a few tips for you. When making your wax formulation, adding the fine powders and additives can be a little bit tricky. If you just add them in on top when it's all melted, they'll just clump together and won't incorporate properly. So when the wax is melted, grab a little bit and then use that to make a slurry with the powders, then add that in afterwards. It just really helps it incorporate evenly, much better. The first time I did it, I actually mixed the powders with isopropyl alcohol to make a slurry. Then adding that in, the alcohol was supposed to boil off, but it was a bubbly mess and it was a little bit dodgy. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend that approach. Also, lightweight chains like this one can be a little bit annoying. So they've got hollow pins and cutouts on the plates. Wax just gets caught in there and it kind of negates those lightweight benefits and it's just a little bit more messy. So I would stick with basic chains like this one here. I mean, this is factory fresh, so I'd need to clean it and strip all the factory lube out, but these ones are just much easier to deal with. When I started, I assumed a decent, slightly thicker layer of wax was better. Absolutely not. It just ends up flaking off from the chain and can gum up your jockey wheels and cassette a little bit as well, so less is definitely more. And on that note, I've started to ever so slightly clean the external plates of the chain while it's drying to remove any of that excess, because the majority of it just needs to sit around the rollers and the pins in the chain. Chain waxing kit from Silca, arguably one of the biggest players in this game, which comes with everything you need, including their proprietary wax blend and arguably a much better kind of wax pot or wax melter as well. It's around 120 quid. My DIY approach came out like this. The wax melter from Amazon, that was 24 quid. The 1 kilogram of paraffin wax, that was at 7 quid, again from Amazon. The molybdenum disulfide, 11 quid for that pouch on Amazon again. Microcrystalline wax from eBay, that was £16.50. And tungsten tungsten disulfide. eBay again, that was 13 quid. So in total, that's £71.50p. And you could cut the cost even further actually, because you don't necessarily need both of these additives. Like I said, the tungsten disulfide is supposed to be a little bit better, but it's harder to get hold of and it's more expensive than the molybdenum disulfide. And this does roughly the same job because it's not like a super high stress scenario on a bike chain. So yeah, if you wanted to cut the cost, just choose one of these. So yeah, doing it all yourself does work out much cheaper, and I've got enough wax here to last me a very long time. But the Silca system does seem like a lot less faff, and even though you only get 500 grams of their wax blend, that should be enough to last you around 40 chains, maybe a bit more. So still a decent amount of time. If you get caught out in the rain a lot, even with this new formulation, I still wouldn't bother with it. But aside from that, it's flipping fantastic. Yes, the drivetrain is supposed to be much more efficient, but the two biggest reasons I love it are as follows. Number one, no more black grime. You'll know if you work on your own bikes, it just gets everywhere, all over your hands, on your clothes, under your fingernails. So the fact that I can kind of pick up my bike, move it around, manhandle it, and not get covered in stuff, it's worth the price of admission for that alone, honestly. And number two, everything on the drivetrain lasts so much longer. I mean, if you're dropping fat stacks on like a cassette from Sham or Shimano and you're not waxing your chain.
What are you doing?
So there we go, bing, bap, boom. We're finished. Let me know if you've got your own wax blend down in the comments, and maybe I'll try it out. But yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Ciao.
It's the bonus clip time.
Right, couple of bits that I actually forgot to mention. So firstly, how long does the chain waxing last, right? So in my experience with this blend that I've got here, it's about 150 miles, maybe 200 at a push before you'll need to re-wax. The chain starts squeaking a little bit, and I've got a clip of that actually, so let me roll that in.
Right, so this waxed chain on my bike, it's not rusty at all, and I haven't really done any super wet rides, but if you listen, you might just be able to hear a couple of little squeaks.
So yeah, once it squeaks like that, you'll need to kind of redip. Obviously, if you ride in kind of wet, crummy conditions, it will last a lot less time before you need to re-wax. But yeah, as a decent baseline, 150 to 200 miles. Secondly, I mentioned this to my brother because, as I said, this is a bit like being in a cult. And he said an even cheaper way to do it would be to get some tea lights, because you can pick them up for peanuts, and they're usually 100% paraffin. And then some graphite powder, which, yeah, again, is super, super cheap. You could even add in the microcrystalline wax, and it would be like a really decent chain wax blend for like less than 30 quid. So yeah, maybe I could give that a go. Also, yeah, I'm moving my stuff back into the, my garage. I just got the garage conversion finished, so I'm moving the stuff back in as we speak. So I guess stay tuned for the new episodes in here. And yeah, thanks for sticking with. I'll see you next time. Ciao.